waiting.
Waiting.
No, there it is.
There it is.
Call the Cascade Charter Township Planning Commission order for Monday, November 14th. November 14th, 2022. Let's rise and pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should have recorded the attendance, all are present. Moving on to Article 3, approve the current agenda. Your motion? So moved.
Support.
Moved by Joe, supported by Deirdre. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, move on to Article 4. Approve the minutes from the October 17th meeting.
So move.
Support. Who was it that moved it? I'm sorry. Member Rissy, supported by Member Engel. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, we'll move on to Article 5. Does anybody wish to disclose any conflict of interest that relates to the agenda or otherwise?
No, sir.
Hearing none, we'll move on. We have no visitors in the audience. Maddie, anybody on Zoom? I suppose we could call Ben a visitor, but I don't know if that's a fair representation of what he is. So moving on to Article 7, here he comes. The CIP, and this is a two-part series, right? As I understand it.
Two-part series.
Oh, man.
Gotta shake it up a little bit, right?
No, it's usually so darn long when you've done
Yeah.
it before. I like this.
Yeah, very good. Well, I appreciate you guys having me here tonight. I apologize. It looks like maybe I was only one of the few things on the agenda, so apologize for making you guys come out when you don't have some other business, but I appreciate the time as well. So for those of you that have been through the CIP process before, our capital improvement plan is an artifact of the Planning Enabling Act. So every year we put together a plan that has essentially 6 years of capital improvements. And there's two parts to it. There's one part that's 2023, which also includes our capital improvement budget to be included in the upcoming budget document. And then you have another part that, though it includes 2023, it'll go all the way out to 2028 this year. And that's really the planning part of the document that allows us to have some foresight as to what capital improvements that we need in the township, and allows us to start figuring out how we're going to plan for those projects, and of course, how we're going to pay for those projects. So in previous years, I usually come to the December meeting or a late November meeting with a plan in hand. We work through the process with some township committees, some staff. We put together a plan. We bring it here in front of the Planning Commission. You guys review it, make tweaks every now and then it goes to the board for approval. So these past 2 years, we've had some upstart in some of our committees and boards and commissions, and they've all really taken kind of the bull by the horns and been more involved in the process. So Joe and Wendy will know that at the Parks Committee, we've already been through the intro meeting for the budget and CIP again, and we're meeting in the morning to review those documents. Scott with the Pathway Committee, we have that meeting coming up as well. The DDA is really taking the bull by the horns. They have a lot of money, so they have to figure out how to spend it. So I thought it was just appropriate that I come in front of the Planning Commission before I bring you a document to talk a little bit about what your priorities are, what you'd like to see included in the document, based on the plans that you guys have put together. Obviously, the comprehensive master plan is the biggest one, but you guys can draw from all the other planning documents as well. So really, two-step process. This is really just an open conversation, really for my benefit, to be able to put this plan together before I come back in front of you in December, so that we're not sitting here for 3 hours talking about these individual projects. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, or we'll just open it up for conversation.
Anybody have any questions or comments for the manager? I can start.
All right.
In the past, I've mentioned the PFAS, so we've added that. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Perhaps, and this is not like immediate, but have some kind of line item for cleaning up the river from the PFAS contamination.
Yeah.
I'd love it if we didn't have like bath suds coming out of that river. And I don't know what one can do to do that, but
Yeah. So interesting enough, the Parks Committee is on the same page as you are as well. So actually, as part of their master plan, they have annual river testing in there now. So we've done a little bit in the past. Back when the stormwater system for the airport went in, we did heavy metals testing in the river and have updated that. And then the Thornapple River Special Assessment District committee, part of their weed management program, pays for river quality testing as well. So really the plan is to kind of sit down with those companies that we've used in the past and figure out a comprehensive testing protocol, something that we can rely on every year to figure out what should we be testing for, what can we treat. So I think the first step is definitely figuring out exactly, I mean, we kind of know what's in there, but figuring out the levels and all of that. Of course, the hard part of that is figuring out what to do with it after we have that information. But
yeah, and one thing too, I think in addition to what you're saying is we also talked about not just testing above the Cascade Dam, but testing below the Cascade Dam, because previously Ben has said the testing has only been done above the dam, and we've taken the numbers from ADA for the below the dam numbers, and we're talking about trying to test that at least like Newcastle Park area where before it gets filtered downstream.
yeah, and I guess that's a good segue to just, this conversation could talk about things that you'd like to see just in the budget as well, right? So testing isn't necessarily a capital improvement. Again, in order to qualify for capital improvement, has to have at least 2 years of useful life, has to be tangible, has to be at least $10,000. That's really the benchmark we use for that. But I think that's totally appropriate. And on hearing more of what you guys would like to see included just in the regular budget as well, if you were planning on, some type of study and you want to bring in consultant work or anything, I would just open the discussion up for that.
Two comments. One related to your initial PFAS comment with regard to the river. In this very room, the DEQ or MDNR, whatever acronym you want to use, Eagle, they made the comment that the PFAS levels of the river met cleanup criteria. But at the time that they did that testing, which was at Tessel Park, at that time, there was no definition of how to clean it up. And so they were going to get back to us, but it did meet, the river did qualify for the cleanup criteria for the pollution, but there was no action taken because they hadn't defined what that would be yet. Perhaps now they've started to come up with a procedure for that. Maybe that conversation needs to be opened. I realize that's not really a CIP thing, but maybe it's just a discussion item. As far as CIP items, I would like to see, as you usually do, but the major dam repair fund and any projects that are highlighted in the future on that, I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I've got something here that meets all your criteria. I'd like to get some parkland put together based on the strategic plan survey of our residents. That was high on their list. And I think I'd propose about $1.5 million budget for new land and fund it over 3 years from general budget, from open space budget, and from grants. And our new engineer, township engineer, seemed to be on the ball getting grants. So yeah, I'd like to see that get in the budget, maybe $500,000 a year for 3 years to get some parkland.
And then one thing we did talk about at the Parks Committee too, was one of our requests was to get some funds set aside earmarked for purchasing property for parks. Because right now the process, I mean, it would still be the same process, but potentially it would take less time. Hopefully, if we had money earmarked to purchase new property, it might be easier for it to get through the board quickly, because when property comes for sale, it's not going to be sitting for a long period of time. It's something that needs to be acted on pretty quickly for the township to purchase. So I do believe that is one of the things.
Trustee McDonald mentioned that there was a possibility of expanding Peace Park to the east, southeast area. I don't know if that's still in the offing or not.
You want to give an update on that?
Yeah, I have been in touch with the owner of that property for the last 8 months. And it is I'm wearing this because I was exposed to somebody who got really sick over the weekend with COVID. So
Thank you.
I got Boy Scouts permission to come in here tonight, but I'm feeling fine. So it's a conversation about potentially three different adjacent pieces of property off of Grand River. And there's a question, there's a split ownership of the property right now, a brother and a sister, and they don't see value quite the same way. And so it's going to be a slow slog, and I'm on it. And I will stay on it and trying to keep that relationship going. And Tom's been helping me, so is Tom Rooks. And I had hoped this fall that we'd have some resolution and that we could even walk through that acquisition process this fall, but based on a couple of phone calls, it doesn't look like that's going to happen real soon. So patience.
Thank you for the update. That's good news to hear.
Yeah, and then get back to trustee Nordick's recommendation. So there's really two places in the budget where money for property acquisition can come from. The first one, probably the smaller pot, being the open space fund. So right now, the open space fund is funded through a voter approved millage. The millage was approved for matching funds for the purchase of Peace Park and Burton Park back in 2008. Sorry. And so one of the remnants of that, there was 3 different funding sources for that project. The township through bonds that we took out and the millage funds, DNR grant, and then the Homemeyer Fund as well, which is a local grant fund that contributed money to that. When it was all said and done, there was about $325,000 left in the Homemeyer Fund, which has since been rolled into the Open Space Fund. That fund is earmarked specifically for open space preservation, and through interest has accumulated about up to $375,000 right now. So that money is still there and available when open space comes available. One of the promises the township did make to the executives of the Homemeyer Fund is that we would consult with them before any property is considered being purchased with that. So we did talk to them prior to the purchase of the Wycliffe Trailhead Park property. It wasn't one that they were interested in that money going towards, but they're very interested in open space. They're very interested in the space out by Peace Park. So that's an opportunity, a funding source for that acquisition. Obviously, the other fund that could be used is the general fund. And then to Wendy's point, they did make a request that the township board from time to time will commit part of their fund balance to certain projects. And the Parks Committee is going to make the request to the township board that they commit $1 million of fund balance to future park acquisition, which was great for 2 things. One, it does provide us to be a little bit more nimble. We know when property comes up for sale, a lot of times we have to act quick. It does designate a funding source for that. And the flip side of that is being able to match grants. Quite possibly the most important thing that the DNR looks for is previous grants experience, which we have. We obviously had a very successful park acquisition, and they like to go back to the well again. So whether it be properties that are attached to Peace Park or other areas in the township, it does provide us the access that we need to be able to apply for those grants as well.
Some great open land on 48th Street. Something to consider. Go ahead.
And can you define, just real quick, I just want to make sure everybody understands too, because in my mind, when we talk, my definition of open space is like the Wycliffe area. It's an empty piece of property, but can you define open space? Because the money you're talking about, it cannot be used for these smaller parks, correct?
Correct. Yep. So really, well,
No, that's what you're talking about, but I'm talking about in general.
so you're talking about the Homemeyer monies?
Yeah, and yes.
Yeah. So
I mean, that in particular, and when you're talking our open space, millage that we have.
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated because there are monies commingled in that fund, right? So we specifically account for separately the Homemeyer fund, and what we can use that for is a lot looser. Really, the caveat is checking in with the executors of the Homemeyer estate to make sure that they're on board with anything. But they have said specifically that they want it to be natural preservation, open space, big open areas. So when you're looking at the other money that's in the open space fund, that really goes back to the millage language. And I don't have it in front of me, but essentially it does talk about nature, undeveloped preservation. So really can't use the open space fund to buy a piece of property in the middle of a neighborhood and put in a playground or a baseball field or a soccer field or anything like that.
But a large farm field would work.
As long as you don't plan on developing that farm
Yeah.
field in any way. I mean, that's the key to it, though. You can't turn it into baseball fields or soccer fields or.
To keep it open.
Correct.
And then all those caveats come on top of the fact that the Parks Committee has asked for a budget next year to explore an actual parks millage, which I anticipate that they'll do over the first half to 3/4 of next year, and then make a determination whether they want to consider a late 2023 millage vote or possibly an early 2024 millage vote. And obviously, we anticipate land acquisition to be part of that as well if they choose to move forward with that. So.
Member Roland has been waiting.
Yeah, that's fine. No, two things. I just want to make, since I'm no longer on the Parks Committee, I want to make sure that we remember the most underserved demographic here in Cascade, and that is our middle school and high school kids. There is nothing for them. So I've been preaching a skateboard park for, 8 years. So let's keep that in our mind. And then obviously athletic fields. Those are two things that we desperately need here. I mean, I drive through door and they've got a skateboard park. I mean, Rockford's got, everybody has one but us. So
If you would have come to the Parks Open House last week.
yeah,
You could have seen our master plan
Nice.
proposal.
Good. Yeah, so I mean, I'd like us to
And one of
start,
the first things I think on 2023 is to look at creating a new plan for the rec park, because the rec park is very outdated. Most of it is, and so one of the big things in 2023, you gotta tell me if I'm speaking.
No, you're
wrong,
hitting the nail on the head here.
is for a master plan for the rec park to be developed. And that is one of the requests that we had in the budget as well, is to get money to have a master plan done, completed in 2023 next year. So then we can baby step through what we need to do to get that up to date.
And the board already knows, at least Tom knows, is we're kind of eyeing the administration building on the corner of Burton and Cascade as well. That would probably be for active recreation, not passive. So there's potential there.
Member Hearing has a question.
Sure. If we're done with this conversation, I just have a new thing to add. One of the things that I've noticed, particularly since it's gotten darker earlier, is that the lighting in the village is terrible. I was sitting at Cascade and 28th like a week ago, and it was a warmer night. We were fortunate to have the warmer weather. And there were two different sets of families that were out walking. And one of the families I didn't even catch until the last second, except for the guy had a reflective stripe about this big on his tennis shoes. And it was like right at the intersection of 28th and Cascade. And they were pushing a stroller, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Funny, because today when I was driving here, even in the dark, I noticed, and I was gonna ask you when I seen you sometime, what decides when they put in the new street lights? Because I've noticed when you're going through, even down Cascade Road, there's the new, I don't know anything about lights, halogen lights or something that are more direct, much brighter.
Those are
And
the
then-
LED lights.
Okay.
LEDs, yeah.
And then there's like the older yellowy style that you can't see. And even when you're driving, it's not consistent. It's just kind of random, that they have those newer lights, which I wonder if something like that, how are those decided where they go?
Yeah. So the township can request lights whenever we want. So, and depending on, it can be cheap as $100, if they find a pole that's existing and they can put up a light head on it, typically costs $100. Of course, we pay for the energy, afterwards as that's put on. We've had some that have been expensive as $10,000 because they have to relocate things and put up in a pole or whatever. So we can request new lights anytime that we want. So they really only do LED lights now. That's all they're doing. And as the old lights fail, they're replacing them with LEDs, which is why you're kind of getting the, LED, halogen, LED. The township could take the steps to ask for a carte blanche replacement of all the LED lights. They're more than likely going to make us fund part of that up front, whereas right now, as they fail, they would just replace them with the LEDs.
Even just the intersections, it would be nice to at least.
Where
the
there's the crosswalks. Mhm.
So you're talking about specifically in the village area, right?
Yeah.
Because we get the opposite, right? So we've had a couple requests for intersection lights kind of out in the less developed rural areas, and they've been turned down a couple times just because the nature of those areas. That's always a kind of a fight. You have people that want more and more lighting, and you want people that have less and less lighting. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that would think that more lighting in the village area would be a negative.
And I think I was just thinking that we could start with the village, and then we could kind of slowly expand out
Yeah.
a little bit farther, up Cascade Road, both directions.
And the village area is a little different. We actually own all of that lighting as well. So all of the decorative lights are actually owned by the Downtown Development Authority. So I have my budget meeting with them tomorrow night. So I can bring that up as an item as well.
It's something I'd really like to
They
see.
recently were talking about a lighting upgrade at one of their meetings.
Question, Ben, can you give us an update on the pedestrian bridge on Burden over 96?
Thank you.
Steve Turnipson talked, or Steve Peterson had talked about that many times. And, I thought it was somewhere in the near future.
Yeah, so that project was actually turned down by the township board. The price had ballooned from what was originally 2.1 to $2.2 million up to 3.5 million. They had we were able to identify some additional grant funds, but had a conversation with the board, and they chose that probably wasn't the best investment of those pathway funds right now. So that project, I'd say, has moved to a illustrious list. We'll continue to look at funding, grant funding that might be available out there if it makes sense. But right now, no project is imminent for the pedestrian bridge over 96.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, only because every time I see somebody riding a bike over that narrow
Jogging.
sidewalk next to the railing there, I think this is a disaster waiting to happen.
Wonder how much a lawsuit would cost.
Exactly.
Sure, it'd be more than 3.5 million.
I remember Rissy.
At our pathways meeting, we recently were discussing, I thought, and Ben, maybe you know more about this, but I thought there was some discussion that at least the approach to the bridge might be widened here. I think you brought that up.
Yeah,
actually.
yep. So MDOT is doing a deck replacement project on that bridge in 2023. So they're not making any structural changes to the bridge. They're essentially just changing the wearing surface. One of the members of the pathway committee had a poor experience where even as you're going up to the bridge, the shoulders are pretty soft there. So I did make the request for when MDOT does pave those approaches to, make it a little bit wider to resolve that. And then the pathway committee as well has also been talking about different bridge, the Cascade Road Bridge over the Thornapple River. If you could think about it right now, there is limited pedestrian crossing there. So on each side, you have a 5-foot raised sidewalk with no protection. So talking about with the road commission, we can essentially basically steal some of the width from each one of the lanes, talking about actually cutting that down to grade level so it's not up above, if we do one side 10 feet, if we do both sides 8 feet on each side, and then putting a some type of barrier between the pedestrian lane and the travel lane as well. So that's something that we can do relatively cheap. The road commission's quoted us about $250,000 aside. When we did ask them about an actual separated bridge there, it was $2 million aside. So, unfortunately, whether it was a completely separated bridge, which we would have to build on new abutments, or if we tried to attach something to the existing bridge, basically the bridge is as wide as it can get right now. You can't really cantilever anything off the side. So we would actually have to, make some structural changes to the piers there as well. So the road commission says you can do it either way, but it's about $2 million, no matter which way you choose. So the DDA has been talking about that project as well. I anticipate that coming in front of the board at their December meeting.
That's a good one. Thank you. Yeah.
Speaking of, and I'm just trying to think of last year, and I do not remember having a meeting where you came and talked about capital improvements last year.
I don't think it didn't happen because of the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was like, I don't remember this. Starting to think I'm going crazy, but we do get, I do remember, I think, Steve talking about plans between the township and the road commission for road improvements that are budgeted and planned for next year. Is that something that you will be talking to us about?
Yep. So we're waiting for, every year, the road commission comes back and they give us what's called a Paisley rating map. They basically take all of the public roads in the township and they give them a rating between 10 and 1, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. And then it's color coded as well. So anything that's in the good range, 10 to 8 is green. Anything that's in the moderate range gets more orangish, and then it's red at the bottom for the bad roads. So we haven't got our Paisley rating map back yet, but when they do, what we'll do is we'll sit down, myself and the engineer, start taking a look at what roads probably need to be looked at. I'll share that with all of the committees as well. The township board always starts with a baseline of $400,000 in the budget that's matched by the road commission. So $400,000 gets you $800,000 worth of work. The township board has really stepped up their road funding over the past 4 to 5 years. Whereas I'd say probably after this year, probably a good 65 to 70% of our network is in that green range now. And there's a big blob of red and orange in the middle, and that's the Berger Goodwood neighborhood. And we're simply waiting for the PFAS water main project to be done before we start getting in there and paving. So there's really just kind of a lot of periphery roads, kind of onesies and twosies that need to be addressed. And I would imagine in the next, 3 to 4 years, we're going to move strictly to preservation mode for those roads because we'll have reconstructed nearly every single local road in the township by then.
I have one more question it's not a capital improvement. Maybe it is, I don't know, but it used to be that we had street sweepers that came through Cascade every spring and they went down all of the streets, like all of the small streets. And I haven't seen them the last couple of years. And I'm just wondering if that was like a budget cut or who decided that and what. I just know with the gravel on the side of the road and people biking and different things, it was nice in the spring to see the street sweeper come through and clean up all of that stuff. Just wondering what happened with that.
Yeah, so that's a road commission expense. So I would have to, they run that program. So I guess I hadn't heard that they weren't doing that.
Yeah, I haven't seen them. I mean, unless I haven't seen them.
I haven't seen them.
I
They
haven't
did
seen them.
Cascade Road this year, but they didn't do it until like late August.
Yeah,
It
but
used
they
to
used to
be,
do all of the
I
streets.
used to talk to Steve Peterson about this on a regular basis because all that sand they throw down all winter long washes into the drains and
Mhm.
eventually goes to the
Mhm.
river.
Mhm.
And he told me that the road commission's policy, this was years ago, got pushed out so that they wouldn't start that process until June. And I found that frustrating because, exactly. And they will only clean the catch basins every 15 years. So it's kind of but that's what I was told.
Right,
That was
but
their
I just-
program. I don't know what they're at
something-
now, but
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen them for the last.
Well, I
couple of
mean,
years down
it's a
the side.
question too, if that is the policy or if the road commission has stopped doing it. I mean, is that something that we want to, there's nothing stopping us from hiring a street sweeper to come out and
It
do the
just
roads on
seems
our
to
own.
me that it saves the roads to some degree because they repaved, like you said, most of the roads in
Yeah.
the township feel like they're newer. But by getting rid of all that gravel off
Mm-hmm.
of them, they just seem to stay looking nice. I
Sometimes
don't
they'll
know.
stop
You
the
could ask
grass
the
from growing up in the
engineer.
cracks too.
You could ask the engineer if that affects when people drive on it, if it ruins the asphalt or anything, but.
I do have one question and it's off topic, so I apologize, but what's the status on the bus, the Grata bus? I know that they were talking about raising the rate for us. Oh, yeah, on that. I mean,
So the DDA has a transportation committee they've put together.
Okay.
So the bus service is out of the general fund now. So back about a year and a half ago, the general fund stopped contributing to the 28th Street bus, and the DDA has been picking up all of that funding.
Okay.
They actually we have cut the costs from, it used to be about $375,000 down to about $215,000 with a combination of negotiations with the Rapid, where, not to get into the weeds, but we used to have to pay for what's called a full bus worth of service.
Mhm.
And now we only pay for the time the bus is actually in the township.
Nice.
And then the DDA also cut the hours a bit on the weekend. Went to every hour instead of every half hour, which saves some costs as well. But anyway, you cut it, the ridership for the Rapid is down 50 to 60% from peak before the pandemic. We think we're far enough out of the pandemic now that ridership isn't coming back. There's not going to be a rebound. And they're seeing those same statistics system-wide, right? So it's not just a 28th Street route that's seeing that drop. Their ridership over their entire system has dropped 50 to 60%, which means that the Rapid's having a real identity crisis. The DDA is trying to figure out what's the best way to support public transportation in the township. So
But they're paying 100% of that.
they're paying 100% of it right now. But I imagine whatever public transportation looks like in the township is probably going to change in the next year to a year and a half. The DDA is just trying to figure out what that might look like.
Thank you.
Then has there been any serious conversation about light rail, whether it's from Cascade or other arteries going out from downtown?
So I wouldn't say light rail necessarily. Really, the only conversation that's happened locally has been on the west side of Grand Rapids. There was talk a while about a line, high-speed Amtrak line that would go from Hudsonville out to Holland. So I know that the Grand Valley Metro Council supported a study looking at that a couple of years ago, and I don't know what the result of that was. The township did participate in more of a statewide high-speed rail study 4 to 5 years ago that would connect Detroit to Grand Rapids. I really don't think anything has come out of that either. That was a while ago. I want to say that study was in 2016 or 2017. So kind of some studies on the periphery, but nothing that I would say has amounted to.
No
much.
serious conversations.
Mhm.
Yes.
Not to circle back around paths, but I would like to see, and I think the path committee is gonna eventually end here too, but we'll have to wait and see. But certainly think that there's gonna be once we get we're working on repaving large sections of the pathway system that are deteriorated, and we're working towards that now. Once that's completed in a few years, I could see us wanting to try and attract some grant money and make some matches to expand the system. But I don't know quite how that would look in the CIP. Maybe that's a next year's CIP item, but
Yeah.
I certainly think that, and I guess, we'll probably talk about that at our next meeting a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm considering doing this year, because the Pathway Committee is in the same place as the Parks Committee and a couple other places, the DDA, where, we have these great plans in place now, but we're only about halfway there. We don't know exactly where a gathering place is going to be or what it's going to look like. We don't know exactly what property we want to get in the township for future parks. We don't know exactly where the pathways are that we want to expand. So one of the things that I'm considering is actually an illustrative list in the capital improvement plan as well. So you'll have our typical grid that shows, okay, over the next 6 years, here are the things that we have planned out. But then the subsequent, underneath saying, here are the projects that we're still working on. We don't know what year it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to cost, but we're going to keep this in here as a reminder that, hey, these are capital improvement projects that we're working on as well. And as those plans are developed over the next couple of years, they can then be populated into the top part of the plan. So I think that's a good suggestion, and we got to find a way to illustrate that there's some projects out there that we know that we're working on where we just don't have a cost or a year or anything like that yet.
Thank you.
I got one small question. I'm assuming maybe that you are checking in with like buildings and grounds and the fire department too to see if, okay.
Yeah, yep. Adam does a great job of telling me all of the new equipment that he wants. So
I'm sure he does. I just happen to think with the pathways, like the plowing and stuff, if buildings and grounds, they have one, I think maybe one little like plow tractor thing that I've seen around the township. And I just
Yeah.
wondered if that was.
So they actually have two, but they look
Oh.
exactly the same.
Okay.
So it's like twins that are running around. So yeah, so Jim at the Buildings and Grounds Department, Adam and the fire department. There are things that are capital improvements that really are just replacement of equipment, making sure that those things happen. So, and you'll see those in the plan, but those suggestions really come from staff. They don't come from the boards and commissions.
Anybody have anything else?
I have a non-CIP item when he's done.
So from the CIP perspective, I think I can speak for everybody. I appreciate the approach you're taking this year.
Mhm.
It's a long meeting the other way, and I
Yeah.
think this allows us to give some input. So
Yep.
when do you anticipate on presenting that? Do you have a sense of
The
that?
first meeting, your first meeting in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think we could have it, say, a week or more before to look at?
I'll make sure you have it a week or more before.
Right, no, that's awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Never want to pass up an opportunity to talk to the manager. So we seem to have a growing, I'm not going to say problem, challenge with the homeless. And I'm wondering if you have any updates on what's going on with the homeless, because it looks to me like we make one move and then they gain about three. So I'm wondering what your take is on that, what you know.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we're down to one pair. So when we had the issue underneath the bridge, it took a while, but because that's MDOT property, we actually had to have MDOT make the request for us to remove the individuals from the property. So Kent County Sheriff's Department went through that process. MDOT won't actually make that request until they have, they call it their street team. It's a team of, social workers, essentially. They come from the state. They offer resources to the homeless people. If they take them up on them, great. They can take them to some type of homeless shelter or something like that. If they don't take them up on it, which is 95% of the time, then MDOT fills out the form to get them off the property. So that happened about 3 weeks ago. We had everybody except for 4 of them left. The 4 of them went down the street and set up camp in between RVs
Yeah,
and
okay. I was like, I seen them there.
and the cemetery. Yeah, so again, a little bit different now because that's not MDOT property anymore. We had trouble figuring out if it was Arby's or the cemetery. I think we finally determined it was a cemetery property. So last week, Kent County Sheriff's Department finally was able to go down and evict them off of that property. We're actually, the Buildings and Grounds Department was working on cleaning the site today. So I think that's all gone. So 2 of those individuals left the town completely. 2 of them went over. Apparently they had enough money to stay in the Red Roof for a couple days. They were then evicted out of the Red Roof and ended up on the corner of Hotel and 28th Street over this weekend in a very prominent area. So they're back on MDOT property, so we were able to move them. Omar went and talked to them this morning. They indicated to him that they realize that they're not welcome in Cascade now and we're planning on moving to Kentwood. The Sheriff's Department was able to find them services to help move their stuff that was out there. So that is what's going on with that particular issue. Now, what we're working on is Omar has come up with some ordinances that they have in other townships, cities, villages related to camping on public property or on private property without permission. We're working with legal counsel to hopefully put something in place that allows us to be a little bit more proactive if the issue should come up again.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed Buildings and Grounds was cleaning up the mess by Arby's last week, and then on the weekend I saw all their stuff in front of Red Roof Inn, right on the corner, and then they had some blue tarps strung between trees and the MDOT property, and it looked like on the west side of the bridge, there's a guy sleeping between the rafters. He got kind of creative and put a board up there, and he's got a sheet. So
The seaway up there.
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, we can't win here. So I'm glad to hear that you're on top of it. So,
Yeah, we're trying
thank
to
you.
be proactive. Obviously, it's not a problem that we've had in the township in the past, and kind of going through the rigmarole, trying to understand what MDOT allows and doesn't allow, and having to get those permissions. So we're trying to come up with tools to be more proactive in the future.
Well, keep an eye on Myers parking lot too, because I've seen people living out of their cars in Myers parking lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please pass that. I'm sure Kent County knows, but yeah, please keep an eye on that one too.
Anything else for
Thank you.
Ben when we have them? We'll see him at the next meeting. So.
Yep. So if you guys do think of something, if you just want to drop me a line or an email or stop by the office, happy to have an open ear and hopefully come back with a plan at that first meeting in December that we can get through a little bit faster than we have in the past.
Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay. The next set of review, moving on to Article 8, the proposed amendments to the major street plan. I hope everybody had an opportunity to look through the packet.
Yeah, I'll speak to that here real quick. So I was just wanting to give an update on that as we move forward with kind of reviewing our current major street plan and what that looked like and where we might want to make changes. And the focus was kind of on the industrial area, since that's where this issue was brought up with the trucking terminal operation that per our current standards won't be allowed on craft, even though it's an allowed industrial use. Then I did want to mention that, so as I was going forward with this, I did find on that area of craft, there are still a number of homes on that street. And so the major street plan, it does affect the required front yard setback for homes. So a couple, I think 2 of those right now meet the setback, but if we would change it to a collector road, that setback bumps from 35 to 43 feet. So 2 of those homes would then be within the required setback and would then be considered legal non-conforming. So one thing we would have to take into account. But in kind of that last paragraph there, I mentioned that as I was going kind of through that review, the main issue really seemed to be in this industrial area. A lot of those special uses that are called out, such as that require access to a collector or arterial street, such as, schools, parks, daycare, bed and breakfast, golf courses. Those aren't ones that would be in industrial. Those are really all residential uses. So I think, really the idea is trying to prevent those from being plopped onto a residential street that can't handle the increased traffic. Whereas in the industrial area, the trucking terminal is really the only one that might affect that. And in doing some research, I found a couple previous cases where it does look like there is actually a trucking terminal on that stretch of craft already. One of those was proved back in 91, for example. But instead of going around and changing the major street plans where, again, in industrial, really the only thing that's effective is this trucking terminal use. So a simpler solution could simply be taking out that requirement that trucking terminals be located on an arterial or collector street. So just striking that. And then there really isn't much effect in the industrial area. That's the major street plan really is kind of for those residential commercial areas where we're looking at for daycares or schools that have those high traffic flows that won't be located in an industrial area. So it might be one kind of simpler way going forward, again, is simply striking trucking terminals from the requirement of having access to a arterial or collector street. It's still a special use, so it still gets reviewed by both the planning commission and the board. So it's not like they just be getting thrown around anywhere. They'd still go through, 2 levels of review by our boards and committees. So we still have a lot of input on where they could be located, but that was one alternative I thought of as I was kind of going through this review process.
Okay, I have a question about, so I don't really love that idea, but if we, going back to the homes that would be non-conforming, what would the process then be moving forward if we change that to a collector road? They're non-conforming. What would happen then? essentially nothing would happen to them because they're grandfathered in. correct?
But if they want to do any work or additions or things like that, any changes would then require at least a variance if they'd be able to. And then, of course, if they got taken down, they couldn't be rebuilt where they are, they have to be moved a few feet. But I think the biggest thing is they wanted to add, a porch or addition or something like that.
They
they'd
wouldn't be
require variance.
grandfathered in with the current owners and the current restrictions they have right now. They'd only be grandfathered in for the structure, the way it is currently.
Correct, yep.
Yes, Member Rossi.
Brian, are all of the, are all of those homes in that area, are they all in the same future land use?
The same, yeah, future land use there is all industrial. So the idea is, right, all this area will eventually become industrial.
The
property.
likelihood of somebody making a home improvement or rebuilding a house there, even if it burned down, I think is probably on the low side of the spectrum.
I don't know about a home improvement. I mean, some people there might want to continue living there for 20 years, so I don't know about that, but likelihood of a new one coming, in, I
Right.
say is low. yes.
Yeah, I
was
think
gonna
that,
say, some of those, I thought maybe some of them currently are for sale.
Some of them have definitely been purchased by neighboring LLCs, if you look at ownership, but
That's
there
what I
are,
wondered.
there are still a handful of them that are,
So
Jack and
the
Jill,
ones
Mr.
that we're
Smith on it.
talking about, the two, are those owned by corporations that have?
I believe one is and one is not.
Because I think it's safe to say the one that was bought by
Yeah,
a
down to one.
corporation.
Right.
Yeah, so we're down to one.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions?
No, just my thought on it, I guess, is that I would rather switch it to a collector road. Just because to me, the terminal, the trucking terminal, I know either way, things are gonna have to come through the planning commission, but the thought, to me, that is specifically something that I think should fall defined under collector road to me. Like it's a trucking terminal. I mean, to me, if you're gonna put a trucking company in, you should have to have a collector road.
I think too, if I'm not mistaken, we have the ability to grant a variance if a trucking terminal came to us and wanted to be on a non-collector road.
Right.
And now Brian knows, should somebody call him, hey, there's a path.
Right, but I think, I mean, we had that happen and they were told, well, as of right now, I mean. they
I
would-
think the path is amending the major street plan. I don't think we can necessarily, because it specifically calls out that, the proposed site has to have direct primary access. So I think the process is kind of going through this and reviewing if we should amend the major street plan. So there is still a process there.
Yeah.
But it
um,
would still be changing the street to a major, we can.
I can.
No, but you
I
could
just
do a
don't-
variance.
I don't think we would have told them to go away
Mhm.
like we.
Right, but we
Yeah.
would have, we couldn't have given them just a variance, even though apparently there was, because there is a trucking company on that road, which is
Yeah.
what is floors me, but what you're saying is we couldn't give the trucking company a variance to buy that and put it on there. We would, the change that would have to be made would be that we would have to change that street to a collector. street.
Correct. Yep. That was my interpretation of reading that section of the ordinance.
See, so we
Yeah.
can't, so to me, the only way to make it work would be to change it to a collector road, grandfather in the two houses that are on there. And if they do decide to make changes, they would have to come through the planning commission, and at least that way there would be a way for them to,
Get a variance.
yeah. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah. Member Rossi.
could we change it to a collector road and then just make a some sort of, I don't know the right word here, but just to say that if it's a residential use, that they're exempt from that?
Well, see, I think that's what I was.
I think that's
asking.
kind of what you were saying.
Yeah,
You
and
can
that's
give
what I
them
was-
that with a variance.
Right, and
That-
that's what I'm saying, like, we can't, because my thought was it would be grandfathered in for the people who own the property, that it would stay residential for.
I'm just thinking it'd be nice to be able to do it in a way that they didn't have to go in front of the ZBA.
Yeah. Well, would it be ZBA or would it be us?
It
Well,
would be a
variance would be
ZBA then,
ZBA.
so it'd be a
They have
variance.
They have much stricter
Right.
rules than we do.
That's
Is that a fair assessment, Rob?
Except
Yeah.
for the.
So why are we talking about changing the road? Is there a company that wants to come in? and-
There was.
Okay, but I mean, is there one now, right?
There is one currently on that road.
No, but I'm
That's-
saying,
Two.
is there a company that's coming in now?
I think they
that's
did
saying
go
we need
through
to
with the
change?
purchase of the property with the understanding that it may or may not be changed to
Yeah.
allow.
But in
My
that-
point is, why are we changing it if we don't have to?
We don't want other business to pass us by when that
Right, that's
is in
one.
theory
It's-
a good use for
It
that.
is an industrial area. And two, there's already at least one, if not two trucking companies on that street. So. just
It makes sense.
Legal
Our,
non-conforming, right?
the reality is our map is out of date. The area has gone from being predominantly residential and agricultural to being industrial, and our map is still reflecting what it was before it became what it is now.
So just to summarize, are we thinking, are we looking to address exclusively craft as we go through this? Or are we looking at other things and
My understanding is that's the only section that Brian found.
that?
I highlighted, if you see the map in the
Yeah.
packet, I highlighted a
That's
few
all I
other
read,
ones
the
too.
changes. That was it.
That was
You
it.
would have
Such
looked at
as-
the entire.
Craft 33rd.
And some of those smaller ones there. Again, I was kind of using the county truck route as a basis too. So these are all already truck routes designated by the county. Again, I was looking at it as kind of an approach, would these make sense to have, the trucking terminals? That's really the only industrial use affected by the road
On
classification.
page 11, if you're not there, you can see where he put in yellow.
Yeah, it was just the highlighted places.
Yeah.
So the two kind of options to address it were changing the road classification or striking the requirement that trucking terminals be located on collector or arterial roads.
And to me, that just is where they belong.
And we don't have to do both. We could do,
Right, we can
Right,
keep them.
you could do one or the other.
but it seems like, to me at least, the better first approach would be to change the road classification for those you've highlighted, but leave the trucking terminal
Mhm.
on that list.
So then we would do nothing with that, leave it as is. That's what you're saying, Ben?
We'd have to amend.
No,
I
we
agree.
would make those changes that
Right.
he recommended. The yellow ones would
Yeah.
change.
but
Become-
not
become
definition.
Not change the definition.
Do we want to make a motion? for
Does
that?
somebody want to take a crack at that?
I think if you just have a general directive, then I'll work on making those changes and bring those clear to you at the next meeting. And then we can move forward. I think I'll bring it to you one more time and then we'd move forward with a public hearing to begin that actual process of amending the
Is
map.
everybody good with that? Does anybody have a concern?
Yes.
Okay, no, let's go through
Yeah.
it.
No, I don't see the need for us to change it I understand what you're saying. We don't want businesses to pass us, fine. Listen, if a business comes to us, we can change it at that point, but I don't see what the need to change it for now.
Because the problem is the business came to us and we can't move fast enough to
But I
make it
think
work for the
They could do
business.
a.
And
Two
Brian's concern,
non-conformings.
I think, is that the Kent County Road Commission has already made the change in theirs.
Okay,
And this is just to align
to
to
mirror with theirs.
there it is.
Okay.
And Brian, please correct me if I,
Right, like I said, these have all been designated as truck routes by the county
Okay.
that I'm proposing. So it's not like we're making something drastically different than what the county has shown on theirs.
So what you're doing here is essentially conforming to existing use.
Yeah,
They're all
pretty much.
being
Yep.
used right now. It's being
Right.
used as collectors and we're just
Right.
putting a label on it.
Yep, correct. That's a good way to put
that
it.
aligns to what the county has already done and also what we've, done for future zoning.
Okay.
Is that,
That makes me feel better.
okay?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any concerns? All right, there's your directive.
All right.
Get it done.
So Brian, just one more question. Brian, you did a global look, right? I mean, you looked at the township and this was what you came up with in terms of potential changes.
Correct. I kind of focused on that industrial area while doing a broader look as well. There was no other ones jumping out at me
Okay.
in the residential commercial areas that needed to be changed and I'll do one more pass through, but if anyone takes a look at that and feels, differently, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Well, thank you for your work on that.
I looked at it and it was pretty comprehensive. I mean, this is kind of like the newer industrial area, if you will, Joe. So like, it makes sense that it would have been this, 15, 20 years ago when we did it last, so.
Yep.
This does not require any ordinance change at all.
We are amending the zoning ordinance since it's an appendix to the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So that's what I'll work on going forward with next and hold the public hearing and go through that process.
Perfect.
And with that public hearing, right, I'd notify the property
I
owners
was just gonna
along
say, let's
those,
get a
so.
couple of postcards out to those
Yep.
property owners, just. to-
So they'll be notified that we're changing that. It'll make them clear of how that affects their property.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, moving forward to Article 9, an update on the Grand Valley Metro Council Airport Access Study. As trustee Norwood will attest, this was a little bit touchy at the last board meeting.
Yes, sir.
And so I'd love to hear more from him after Brian goes through it. So
Yeah, and I did really kind of want to include this in as an informational piece, since this was presented to the township board by members of the Metro Council staff to make sure you're all seeing it as well. And I think I, brought you an update back, it was back in September, and this was just a little further down the line for them. So these were the slides that presented to the township board, and trustee Nordic can tell a little what the board gave comments back to Metro Council staff about their thoughts on that.
I'd like to hear those, your interpretation of the events.
It didn't fly real well.
Bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah, they want to make an exit off from just a future idea of an exit off M6 to come into the south side of the airport. They were talking about an exit off from M6 again into the 48th Street way into the airport. They were talking about a way to come in from 60th, kind of the Kentwood side. And then 36th Street, which makes perfect sense because the interchange, the exit's already there.
wouldn't need to be an exit, would there?
There is an exit.
So there-
All they
there
have to
is
do
one.
is take down a fence and go.
Yeah.
And it's their fence. They have not communicated their plans. They were doing a lot of this without us. Is how the board felt. And then I told them I'm more than happy to support their 36th Street access, but I wouldn't support any of their other accesses, so.
Was that the board's view overall?
Kind of the board's view overall, yeah.
Who sits, Ben, if I could pick on you since you're still here, who sits on the Grand Valley Metro Council from Cascade?
So the supervisor always represents the township on the Metro Council. And then there's a couple of sub policies as well, subcommittees as well. So I represent the township on the policy committee. Brian represents the township on the technical committee.
And which one would this one come out of, or would, I mean, is this access setting more global, or would?
So I know we haven't talked about it really at the policy committee at all.
Okay.
So we did some at the technical committee, and I don't know what went to the Metro Council board as a whole. But again, so they have a few, as part of this, they have a technical action committee meeting that I think's met 3 times, and I've tried to attend those when possible. Ben attended the last one, and that was, I think, after I'd shown this to you back in September, and we got initial comments then that people weren't a fan of necessarily the M6 exits, and I think Ben relayed that at the last technical advisory committee is what it's called.
And like, Ben, do we have, what can we do if we decide as a township we don't want, or, if we prefer one over the other, do we have any pull with, I guess it would be the road commission, no?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we absolutely have pull, and I think they definitely got, this is the point in the process that they're looking for that feedback. And not only did they came to Cascade first, but they're going to Caledonia and Kentwood and doing those as well. I think one of the things that's going to be really important though is the exits off of 6 are based not only on the airport's access issues, but they're grabbing data from our future land use plan right now, and that future land use shows those as industrial properties. I know that's something that the planning commission is talking about, should that go back to, should that the industrial be removed? I think it probably behooves the township to figure that out sooner rather than later, because I think that'll make a huge difference on what some of those recommendations are coming out of that plan.
I have a question for anybody. Did the airport give any reasoning why they wouldn't want the 36th Street? I mean, because my understanding is it's probably going to cost them a lot of money because the entrance would have to, the road in would have to be tunneled underneath of the
Runway.
yes.
That runway's going away in their master plan.
Right, but I still think they can't keep
I
the.
think that's probably their preferred option, is that 36th Street access coming
I
down.
just wanted to know why they're spending all this time and money doing all of
So
this.
this isn't the airport, just clarification, it's the Grand Valley Metro Council who is.
Well, and again, I guess
Yeah.
why are we talking about it? If you guys, right now, we're saying the airport likes that idea and the township likes that idea, why are all of these other ideas being put out there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, really, so for better or for worse, the process that they followed was, step one was really to collect the data and, figure out what the issues are. The second part of the process was to figure out what are the potential solutions, right? So anything that was technically viable to solve the issues that they had showed up in that state of the plan. So really now what they're doing is going to these entities and saying, here's the entire spectrum of viable alternatives, right? Now, which one of these are they not financially viable? Are they not politically viable? And they'll eliminate it down that way. So
Okay.
it's kind of a round robin process of coming to exactly what you're saying is that, if everybody agrees that, the 36th Street, tunnel entrance to the airport is the one that's most likely to happen, and that's the one that's most likely to rise to the top.
Member Newell has been waiting.
So they also, Grand Valley Metro also said they surveyed passengers that use the airport, and this was some of their ideas, some of their input, how they chose off the selected list of priorities. And again, we just did a strategic plan that surveyed our residents, and not one of our residents asked for another exit off M6. Not one of our residents in those surveys said that they wanted the ag land by the airport changed to industrial. So I think, and as they're saying, this M6 exit would serve that new industrial in our plan. I think we should be changing our plan to revert that to agriculture, keep it open space. That's what our residents wanted.
I'm just hesitant to glean that from that survey, because I think depending on how you ask that question, you may get a totally different response. So if you ask somebody, here's 10 sites, where would you want industrial? Then they'd say, I want it there. But if you said open-ended question,
Yeah.
that's probably not something top of mind.
You can ask it any way you want. That's how it came back in our surveys.
Member Ritchie, then member Rowan.
I was at the meeting where I got to watch the presentation from the Grand Valley Metro Council, and on their phase 2 survey summary, where they list what are the top 2 airport access improvements you would like to see. This was brought up in the meeting. The second highest response was secondary access point from the north or west. Now, the gentleman there seemed to believe that it was a mistake and they meant to say east, but he didn't really clarify that. And I noticed the slide is still the same, saying north or west. And I guess my question is,
We didn't get new slides.
where is, what's that?
I don't mean to interrupt you. We did not get new slides. This is the same presentation.
I understand that, but I'm curious, I'm really curious as to if either A, the respondents are directionally challenged, B, they did make the mistake that it's north and east, or is it south and east? I guess it probably doesn't matter too much to me, because I think that 36th Street is the most logical spot, which is on the north side. But I am real curious if the people thought that they needed more access from the south or west. And since it's incorrect, it would have been nice if he could have given us I felt he didn't give us a specific, I think he was blindsided by that it was off. So I just thought I'd point that out. If you read that, it sounds like there's a mistake, but we don't really know what the correct answer is either.
Yeah, so well, I agree with what Timmy said. I think when we had our public hearing, we had a couple of residents that actually lived out there. And I mean, I'm totally 100% agree with them, but when the residents are sitting here saying, we're okay with it, I think we need to have more resident input. I mean, I think if we're going to have a public hearing on this, a lot of emails or a lot of mailers need to go out, and a lot of people need to reach out to hear what the community wants. Because based on the feedback that I got from sitting here from the 2 or 3 residents, they were okay with it.
Well, and I do think too, and I don't know, Brian, how far this has gone, but at our last subcommittee meeting too, one of the things I requested was we have an employee with the township who's an economic development director. I think we need a report from the economic development director to let us know what kind of impact this would have on our township. To me, that is what that role should be doing to me. Like if we're looking at a huge section and talking about all of this stuff with the airport, we employ an economic development director. They should be giving us a report as well to let us know what kind of impact this will have on the township, whether it be positive or negative, or, you know, jobs it may bring and what the current is. I have a big question. We have the realtors that either have purchased the land in that area that we're here at the public hearing, or have a parcel for sale telling us there's no property for sale in Grand Rapids. There's no industrial property for sale in Grand Rapids. We should have a neutral source, somebody from the township telling us what is available. If there is a need for this, I mean, if there's not a need for industrial property in the township, then why are we even talking about it to begin with? I think we need to look at it from all sides of things, not just, you know, this current property, what are we going to do with it? What is the future zoning? Like, what is the need? Is there a real need for it or not?
So I know Supervisor Lesperance had reached out to our economic development director on some of that questions on industrial land for sale and lease. And I think she provided some numbers back to her, and I can see if I can get those and
Yeah,
maybe
but
have them
I
at our
still
next
think that we need-
committee meeting.
Once, at some point, it needs to be presented to us by the person who gathered the data so that we can ask questions about it. That's my opinion for the subcommittee. And I think that that same train of thought is going to have to go with it when it comes to the planning commission and when it goes to the board, that there's a lot of sides to this.
Member Moxley and then member Rissy.
Okay, well, expanding upon what Wendy said, we do have a visitor, actually 3 visitors now at the subcommittee level who are talking about, you know, there's 0 industrial land available, we need more. And I don't know whether to believe this or not. We need an independent opinion on this stuff. The other question I had is for trustee Nordhook. They're proposing a ring road from 60th over to Thornapple River Drive. How's the Board of Trustees viewing that?
That was another extension. That's interesting. They're not happy with the way this was presented. We have ways to get into the airport that are very simple.
And have worked for a long time.
Worked for a long time. And 36th Street's the most obvious.
Okay,
Come in, and then you can do your ring route in their property.
yeah.
We have a lot of residential homes going up out there. There's several developments going in. And I just don't see this industrial thing going. There's plenty of space in other townships for industrial. I don't think we're here to serve industrial. I think we're here to serve residents. We have industrial areas.
Okay,
I'm not gonna, all right, but I am gonna rehash a comment that was made earlier about, well, this road wasn't zoned this way and we scared off the business.
Right.
But yet in the same, hold on, but yet in the same breath, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'm just saying, you know, I like to be consistent.
Well, and I think if you subcommittee meetings or really look at the township map, we are talking anything on the west side of the airport currently, that southwest corner, and it's really the northwest corner of the township is industrial. We're maintaining that and keeping that moving forward. And that is exactly where those roads are that we're talking about. That's why we thought those roads need to be switched to meet those properties. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we are being consistent. And I think anybody on the subcommittee who is looking at it, I think would agree.
And see, I'm looking at it and maybe I'm not on the conversations, but I can tell you from potentially an outsider looking in. No,
Okay, so. the
I
roads-
don't see the
Okay,
consistency.
the roads we just changed already have transportation, 1, if not 2 transportation companies on them.
I'm not talking.
No, but no, you are talking about that. Those are the roads we changed. So
I'm
that
not
the
talking
business-
about the roads. What I'm saying is that you're making a choice to change something because you don't want to not attract business. Okay, now you're making a change not to do something and not attracting business. right? So you're saying it's okay to make a change over here to attract business, but it's not okay to make a change over here to attract business. That's the inconsistency. The roads was just an example. I don't care about that.
And I think back to that, the current business use,
Yeah.
never mind, I won't answer you, I won't respond. That's your statement, good. You go ahead.
Everybody should rest their case.
Ben has had his hand up for a while, so go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so just to harken it back to the airport access part of it, right? So this is with the committee meeting that I, attended, this is really the point that I brought up, is that if you're not having the conversation about the industrial uses, if you're simply having a conversation about the access to the airport, the M6 interchanges don't make any sense if you don't have additional improvements as well, right? So if you have the exits off of M6, but the only way to get in the airport is still 44th Street and Patterson, you're just getting off M6 and driving around the airport to get to the same place.
Right.
If you're talking about airport access, the M6 interchanges have to be coupled with either an access from the west side of the airport, tunneling underneath to get to, or the access from 96. So again, I think it's really important. I think this is a great conversation you guys are having, but I think it really changes the flavor of what is palatable in the Metro Council study if access to industrial property isn't something that they need to consider.
Right. You hit the nail on the head. You got to make a decision first.
Member Rappin's winning, then member Rissy, then member Nordhook.
So what I'm hearing is that everybody seems to agree from the airport to the township that 36th Street off M6 is the preferred way to go, right?
Mhm.
So is there any, if that is the preferred route, what's the likelihood that they're going to do that and an M6 interchange at 48? Or were they looking for one or the other?
I think right now they're just gathering feedback on all the technically viable options that they have. To be honest, probably the biggest hurdle for the M6 interchanges is MDOT. They just don't do interchanges anymore. I mean, even the little, they're doing the one side of Fulton on 96 right now to get on there. It's been in their plan for 35 years to do that. But to harken back to your question, I mean, the 36 access is going to come down to money. That's probably $120 million project minimum. So again, I think all of these have, some of them are more politically viable, some of them are more financially viable. There isn't one solution that everybody can point to and say, oh yeah, from all aspects, that's going to be it. That's what we want.
Do you have cost estimates on each? No.
I don't, just kind of maybe ballpark like that.
Yeah, they do have, there was a more expanded presentation that they had. I think they had some of those costs in there. I'll see if I can track that down.
Might be interesting to know because that would tell you which one they're going to lean to.
Member Rissy, member Nordhook.
I found it very interesting when we reached out to the people between M6 and the airport. There are only about 7 homes in that area, but there's probably, and Brian, help me here, there's probably about 20 landowners, not quite.
Maybe 13.
13, okay, so there's twice as many landowners roughly than there are homes there. And I thought the landowners are probably thinking, hey, I've owned this a long time, I know that it's future planned industrial, I'm content with that. But the homeowners, I thought, might be the ones that would be more vocal, and that really was not the case. It was actually, for the representation we had, it was 50-50. And the homeowners that came in, the residents in that area that came in, were kind of like, yeah, whatever happens, happens. And that was really telling. I was really shocked at that. That's not how I expected it to go down at all. And so that was an interesting takeaway. The other thing I would say is that if the supervisor has communicated with the economic development director and has some information, I certainly would like that to be shared with, really, it should be shared with the planning commission as a whole, but certainly with our subcommittee, because I mean, that's what we're talking about. And if somebody's gathering information, by all means, I'd like it to be shared with us. It might help us. So.
Member Nordhook.
Green Valley Metro Council was presenting all of these ideas, and of course, it's always easy to spend somebody else's money. But they're the ones that came up with the idea of running a new bus route from the airport to downtown Grand Rapids. And I question them on that with ridership down as huge as it is. Why would you propose another empty bus? Now, whether people gonna leave downtown Grand Rapids, to come out to the airport for a dining experience? They're gonna come out and watch the luggage go around on Carousel One. I mean, what a silly process to say you want a bus from downtown Grand Rapids to the airport. I see nothing in it. I see no value in that. But these are the same people that are planning these expansions here. And I think we need to get rid of that future in our master plan, get rid of that industrial zoning and get it back to ag. Our residents, their survey said they want more open space, more parks. So they didn't say more industrial. I want to listen to our people. I don't want to listen to people getting off planes, going to different communities around here. That this is what they want. I want to listen to our people. So if it takes getting the industrial off our master plan to stop an M6 exit, I'm all for it.
Thank you. I think the other thing too is, and I probably don't have to tell you, but it's probably not a bad idea to remember that the airport has not been a good friend, Cascade. And I mean.
Well, yes, memory.
As I look at this, the potential M6 exits don't really provide access to the airport. They just don't do that. The only one that really provides the access is 36th Street, right? I mean, in terms of people wanting to get on a plane and fly. Am I missing something here? So the rest of this would be providing access to something else, right?
M6.
Presumably development around the southeast corner of the airport.
I think their thought process on that was that if they did a ramp at 48th Street, then they would have to have an entrance coming in from somewhere along Thorn River Drive.
Somewhere where?
Along Thorn River Drive. Otherwise, you're right. You're absolutely right. It serves no purpose. Just like one at like 60th and M6 doesn't serve a purpose unless there's another drive in or out of the airport aside from 44th Street.
And if MDOT isn't building interchanges anymore, that's sort of a moot point. I mean, unless there's a huge push here based on something that I don't see yet. Regardless of how that's zoned.
Was question.
Yeah.
Was Grand Valley Metro Council, when they came and gave this presentation, was it merely just saying, hey, these are the options that we've come up with, and that we've done a study on, or were they arguing a point?
No, it was, and I'll let trustee Nordhook, here's the background that I have. I was, the supervisor reached out to me somewhat emotional because she wasn't happy. Did you see this? And I said, no, I haven't seen it. And it was published somewhere. And she said, well, I'm going to get them to come talk to us. And that's what brought that in. And as I understood it, watching the presentation, again, I wasn't there. I watched it on Zoom. Trustee Norwood was. It felt like it was more informational to me. I think there certainly is an agenda, but the way that they presented it, to answer your question, felt informational. I don't know, trustee Norwood and then trustee, yeah, and then member Rissy.
I think there's a few agendas going.
Yeah.
We've got some developers that want their industrial zoning now. We have some landowners that want to sell to these developers. We have Grand Valley Metro Council planning our township. I don't think that's their job.
The right place is also involved if they're an economic development group.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're finding grant money right now to help get water. I think is that fair, Ben? I said that the right place is also involved and they're helping source grant money for water to get it to the, because that's the negating factor, right? If we even turned it all into industrial today, nothing could happen until water and sewer was there. And I think the back of the napkin math was just like 12 million-ish.
It was, yeah, so it's like $13 million to actually design a water sewer system that serves that area.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to just serve the parcel that we're talking about with the developer that we all know we're talking about, is probably at least $6 or $7 million to get it there, just to extend the line to that. So it's a huge negating factor. On top of all of that, you know, the township controls the extension of water sewer lines in our township. Even if a developer came to the township and said, here's $10 million, extend water sewer to my property. If the township doesn't want that piece of property developed, we just simply say, we're not extending water sewer lines there. So there's a couple different controlling factors that the township has.
Yeah, and trustee Nordhook, if I could be so bold, what is the tenor or the feeling of the board should a developer come with the money? Do you feel that the board, as it sits today, would approve that, or say, no, we don't want that?
I don't think so. To take 80 acres of agricultural zone land and then turn it in, if all you had to do is have water and sewer brought out there for 15 million bucks and turn it into industrial, 80 acres of industrial becomes very valuable, far more than the $15 million to get it there.
Yeah. I think, not that it should impact or influence you all at the subcommittee, but you do need to understand the position of the board on this, which is strongly retained as ag. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that is.
No, and we have talked.
Question the
about that.
value of the subcommittee then. Is the board looking for the subcommittee to provide input or to tell the subcommittee what
I think
outcome they would like?
I think they're looking for input, certainly. And if there's a reason that it should not be ag, I would be, and that's my point, Ben, not to suggest that you should fall in line, but if you're gonna recommend against that, I'd be really clear as to why. Right. Perhaps if M6 is a design characteristic and plenty, see where I'm going, like be very specific about that.
Yeah.
Because you're going against the grain at some level with the board as it sits today, so you need to be very, very specific.
And I think that's the homework that we're trying to
Yeah,
do.
and I mean, I've said that point
Yeah.
blank at our meetings, that we have to come up with some sort of compromise if anything is going to change that would make both sides happy without overdeveloping the land. I
Very,
guess.
yeah,
But
be compelling.
we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is that, yeah.
Yeah, that's just a different assignment, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
if we're given the assignment to show the work and come up with a proposal, I think that's different than.
Well, I think also, but understanding what you're going against too, if you're saying, hey, it should be this, just be really clear as to why it should be that over the other. So, all right, I'm gonna start with our vice chairman and I'll move down the line.
Well, I just wanted to mention that the developer is sitting in on the meetings. Started with one person, now there's three. And that, you know,
Well, and I don't
and they're
think
pretty outspoken.
they are outspoken, but I'm outspoken as well. And I don't, I mean,
We
feel like-
noticed.
I feel like
Good
I
for you.
Said things to them. The one guy said he was behaved the first meeting and I said, I'm not really, because he did make some kind of rude comments, you know, and I'm not gonna let them, because it did feel to me, especially the first meeting and the second one, almost like a bullying situation, even though I don't think they meant that, but I think it kind of felt that way. But they are public meetings, and I think that, you know, I'm not afraid to voice my opinion. And again, that's why I told them, they can tell us whatever they want about land in Grand Rapids area, but we need to hear from staff at the township to have a neutral opinion. We also can't take their word for whatever they're saying to us, because they did pay, he's told us multiple times, how many million for the 80 acres? I mean, he's told us how much he's paid, how much? 3 million for the 80 acres. I mean.
76 acres.
Yeah, so
Are they
I
participating?
just don't listen to them.
Are they actively participating in your meeting or are they
shouldn't
just
be.
making
Yes.
comment?
They're
actively.
participating.
That's a problem.
Yeah, they should, there should
They
be a
don't just wait
public
until the
comment
end.
So
section in the meeting.
I'll
but-
connect with your
Yeah.
chairman
do
afterwards. Like we have an agenda format, like we should have public comments.
Yep.
And
We do. We have an agenda. We follow it. We have a spot where they can make public comment. I extended to them the opportunity to be able to add a comment if, you know, in our conversations, if,
Yeah.
you know, because there was only, at the time, there was only one, and it became three of them. And they have spoke very little, I would say. They've made some comments. We asked them specifically for a list of uses that they thought they would want there. So they've provided us with some information in the process, but I don't think they've been.
The second meeting was much more appropriate. The first meeting, it felt like he came with a little chip on his shoulder about this public. He was still mad, just like he was here, about the survey that went out and that they didn't know anything about the survey process. And he had that attitude. And if he would have done that attitude at the second meeting, I would have talked to Scott and said, you need to stop.
Well,
Like,
I
because
thought I was pretty clear with him that I think we even used the word behave.
Yeah.
If he behaved, we would let him make some comments along the way. And he was much quieter at that meeting.
At the second.
At the second
first
meeting.
he
The first meeting, he had his two
He had an attitude.
comment periods and he filled them up with attitude.
I just be
We're-
careful with,
we're-
because you have interested parties. and
Sure.
You're not represented, so just, that's my only word of caution, like, from a legal perspective, be careful, like,
Mhm.
so.
I
Okay.
do think we should limit them to those segments of our agenda where it's visitor comments
Right, but
only.
we are asking them for comments. I mean,
Right.
you know, I asked them specifically at least 3 questions that I did want to hear their response to as well. But I don't know how that would work.
I would
with
limit
public
it to
comment.
the end if they're gonna speak. And ask, but again, I'll defer to your chairman on this. You have interested parties participating actively in a meeting and we have a format, that's all. So just be careful, guys, that's all. Okay, Member Rissy, I think you had something after. we
I
cover-
did. I was gonna say with respect to, I think what we were talking about was the Grand Valley Metro Council. And if somebody really wanted to get some feedback on this, of what the people in that area thought, all they would have to do is send that picture of an interchange at Thorn River Drive and an interchange at 48th Street to the residents of Golden View, Kilmer, Sequoia, and Prairie River. And I think the phone would start ringing off the hook. And I don't think that the majority of those residents would be in favor of interchanges there, because the complaint I always get is that there's too much traffic there to begin with, particularly coming from Foremost in that area down Thorn River Drive to 48th Street. And that whole area gets pretty congested in the, the rush hour time.
And it's going too fast down Thornapple.
Well, I mean, that's a fast road, to begin with, but.
And
yeah,
again, that's
it's-
my concern with the industrial too on that side is.
I know, and you've brought that up a lot at the meetings, and that's, yes, I think that might have been one of those spots where people got a little contested in.
So in that rolls,
Member Rowland,
yeah, that rolls right into what I was gonna say, and,
Yep.
and this is a question for the subcommittee. Would it be appropriate for the committee to reach out to those residents and say, hey, guys, this is what's going on. We'd really like some feedback and we'd really like to hear from you. As of now, we've only heard from a few people and they really haven't pushed back on this, right? I mean, we need feedback from those residents, and I think if we had that feedback, it would make things easier for us to go in a direction because we're doing what the residents.
I think that expanding beyond M6 is certainly something that could be done if that's the direction we're asked to go. We haven't done that. We did get one letter, I think, from somebody on the Prairie River the last time, which was outside of the area that we contacted, because we contacted the people that were directly impacted. But I guess what I would step back a minute and remind all of you that initially the subcommittee was formed to look at the zoning of the airport. And then recently, our task was expanded to look at the future land use of the land between the airport and M6. Now, we're talking to residents even further east of M6. So this project that was originally, this big is every time we have a planning commission meeting, it's ballooning out larger. And to come up with a recommendation in a timely manner and having the scope of what you're working on change every other meeting is is a bit of a challenge. I mean, I had mentioned before, and I'll bring it up right now, that I thought we needed to look at the area east of Buttrick and our farmland preservation zoning and our agricultural zoning, because I think that if people are asking for us to preserve land and slow growth, that's the key spot to look at it, I think.
Yeah,
But it's-
coming to a planning commission meeting soon, right? Our next subcommittee, you're getting a very preview of it, right? And member Engel has another one. So we in fact, as we enter the 2023 year, we'll have two that branch off. So that's the first one on ag. So
Somewhere we got to divide a line
Yeah.
between all of this and say, this is what we're gonna work on. So, I mean, yeah. I
we
wanna
have.
focus.
I think as each subcommittee ends, I've been pretty happy with what we've been doing there. So, okay.
I just want more,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? That meeting, the people that were here didn't have a problem with it, right? And I really kind of want to do what the residents want, right? And I guess I need more feedback to say one way or the other.
Okay.
Well, let me ask this. Is there a show of hands here as to if people would like us to reach out to those neighborhoods that are between M6 and the river in that kind of backyard, if you will, of where this proposed area that we're talking about?
Do we want to do that at the subcommittee or when the subcommittee
Or the
reports
township?
to?
Well, I'm wondering if
Reports to
I
us,
was-
do you want to do? it
I
then?
think that would be at a planning commission meeting, not a subcommittee, but is that something that we would entertain seeing, or do we not want to do that?
I think
Would it
that's
be
for a little
helpful for them
probably
to
further
react to
down the
something?
road than.
I mean,
Yeah, that's my point.
would it be
That's
helpful
why-
for us for that the subcommittee finish its work, come up with
Yeah.
some recommendation and then present that out for feedback? It seems like that would be,
Have a public hearing.
have a more
on-
focused feedback instead of just kind of
Yeah.
broad conversation.
Brian, what would the normal protocol for the public comment?
Well, I mean,
hearing be?
what we're gonna go is we're gonna, be amending our plan, so we will have formal public comment at some point. It's the question of if we want to do, like we had before, was one that we had previously just to get comment, but I would think to that point, we'd have kind of the subcommittee wrap up theirs and provide recommendations, and at that point, we want to get kind of, I'll call it more informal comment before moving forward, we could always do it at that time. But then, as we move forward with the formal process, we'll be holding public hearings and things like that and notifying residents.
I think it would really help the planning commission and the township board to hear the feedback of the people that would be impacted the most.
Would it make a difference in your decision as a subcommittee to get that feedback beforehand?
That's the problem I have is I feel like we're wasting time going, make potentially one route and then hearing from this big, huge southwest corner of the township, which is really almost what we're talking about, hearing, oh, yes, we made up this compromise and then hearing from them if they all say, no, we don't want it. It's like, okay, I mean, we're meeting weekly for at least an hour. I mean, that's a lot of time in our week and in our lives that we are committed to this. I don't want to waste any more time doing this if we're going to have a public hearing and be told something completely out. Yeah.
I concur.
Or going a different direction,
Could there- could
like
there
you
be-
guys are thinking no and they're thinking yes, or whatever, yeah.
Would there be a compromise, and I'm just putting this out here, that perhaps in January, we have a lot in December, we get a preliminary based on what you have so far, and that's when we have a public hearing. And then that we can send the subcommittee back to put their official recommendations. before the commission get involved.
Then we come back to you in February or something with that recommendation.
That's kind of what I'm.
Then the planning commission hashes it out,
Gets
and
to
then
the
it goes to the
board.
township board. They'd have it
Yes.
in March probably.
With that?
Say it one more time.
Yes, so you all will wrap up what you're doing in the next month and give us a preliminary observation, or whatever the heck you want to call it, that we will present, and we will have a public hearing to get feedback on that.
Do you want us to come up with then more than one suggested or more than one?
However,
option?
I don't,
'Cause
I don't
If we're
want
gonna have.
I don't want to
public
limit
comment-
you, whatever you think is best, knowing that you're going to come into a public comment. Again, I don't want to limit you, and I don't think anybody else does, but bringing us, hey, your observations, and that's why I use that
Okay,
word.
well, because we could do three. We
Yeah.
could do, keep it as it is, change it 100% industrial, and we could come up with a hybrid, which I
Let's look
feel
at
like is
what
we're working
predicated
with
this
right now.
conversation. 3 options from the Grand Valley Metro Council.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah,
To your point
Because-
earlier, I think if we work on the compromise part and then have the kind of the extremes, none of us on the subcommittee, I think, are leaning towards the extremes, knowing that the
Right.
compromise is
Yeah.
probably the way to go. I think if we focus on that, then give that input back would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is realistic. Scott?
You would really only have to come up with two.
One.
Right? Because obviously doing nothing, you don't really have to talk too much about that, right? We do nothing. We do.
Let's hear from the chairman of the subcommittee. I just, this is a lot of work. I'm gonna.
I think we could do that. I think that would work well. We could come up with a few options and say, hey, here's option A, here's option B, here's option C. And present it to you guys. If we were going to do that, that would probably be the same time you would want to present it to neighbors in the area. Is it not? So that you could get feedback from them. You do it one time, and then you take that feedback from everybody. And we go back into the subcommittee and fine tune the options. Maybe we nail it down to one option as a recommendation, bring that back to the planning commission. Planning commission can digest that and push it off to the township board. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
Everybody, does anybody have an objection to that?
No, I actually feel more comfortable with that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, member Norton.
I would just like to see it involve more than just the people right there in their neighborhood. You know, this is a township wide.
Yeah.
How about this?
And I think other people need to have some input in it as well.
When we get closer to that point, we can decide who we want to send personal invites to, and obviously we would advertise it in our usual venues as well, but we can decide what the radius should be as far as how we attract input.
Brian, normally, what would the normal process be? We would just invite the homeowners,
Can I guess?
personally invite the homeowners that are directly affected.
Right.
But then it's public comment.
Correct. Yep, we do,
300
normal
feet.
publishing in the paper and on the website. If there's specific properties that are being affected either by a rezoning or change to national land use, they would get mailings, but we don't send a mailing to every resident
What
in the
if-
township.
What if,
And we
what
can,
Scott just said, we decided to include a huge chunk of the township? Can we send them all? I mean, I just want to know if this is realistic, what is being proposed.
I don't
Maybe our
know.
definition of huge is different.
Okay,
and again, I think this is more of a, again, informal before we actually set an official
Right.
public hearing. This is just additional comment to our process.
What would be helpful for Brian, if I could speak for him, would be the subcommittee giving him some copy on what he's gonna advertise, right? Not specifically what you're, hey, we're gonna be presenting observation, whatever you want to call it on this, so that when he sends out the mailing, because it's an atypical mailing, is that fair? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and then we'll probably treat it similar to what we did the first time with just revised
Yeah.
language of what exactly we're showing.
And decide what the boundaries of the mailing would
Yes,
be.
yes, member Norton.
You could even include it in the newsletter. Just so.
Yeah, I love that.
Everybody gets it.
because that's what I was gonna say. I think just what I'm hearing. I think it's more than just the subcommittee who wants to decide who's getting notification of this. It's not just the four of us. I think.
Well, no, that's what I was saying. At a later
10-mile
meeting,
radius, yes.
we can talk about this at the planning commission level at a later meeting.
The subcommittee could decide who.
Member Engel has been waiting patiently, so go ahead.
This just be my lack of mental acumen here, but when the committee was formed, the question was singularly the zoning issue on this side of the airport. I mean, that was pretty much it. We were unaware of, the committee was unaware of the Metro Plan's airport recommendations completely. So now with this thrown into the mix, and the potential implications of that, we are going to look at a broad, we're gonna incorporate that into their work and seek opinions from a broader base of Southeast Cascade residents. Is that what I'm hearing? Does this change what we're looking at?
I think it's what we're getting feedback from that has changed, not,
Because of the Metro.
I think it's, put the Metro aside, I think what I'm hearing, and I want to make sure I'm hearing it right, is that we want a broader cross-section of the township that we feel is indirectly affected by the change in land use. Like if you have a home that is close to that area, right? And all of a sudden, you know, you're not driving by farmland, you're driving by industrial, and let's say the traffic would go up, you would be indirectly affected, right? And so we want to hear from those.
I agree, but are we incorporating in that the changes that would ultimately come potentially with additional airport access or additional interchanges? Is that part of the task here?
I think that having that come to us, that information come to us, I think does pivot us a little bit. Yes, I think we have to take a broader look at this now because that's a blip on the radar. And as the manager said a few minutes ago, if that area is future land use for industrial, then the Grand Valley Metro Council is going to probably look closer at that than they would if it was farmland.
And just to clarify something you said as well, the subcommittee was originally formed to only look at the
Airport, that's right.
subcommittee.
That's
And so
right.
it has expanded now to
Twice.
include that,
Yeah.
that future land use area. Whether we talk about the Metro Council or not, we've.
If we talk about a fourth expansion of the subcommittee, I may have to resign from the subcommittee.
Originally, we talked about AC1 and AC2.
Originally, that
And
was.
that was
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
That was it.
We broadened it when we said, hey, let's look at this yellow here.
Yeah,
And
southeast
that-
portion.
Yes, and that was what was
It's
broadened.
Ralph's fault for making the colorful map.
Yeah, it
If he hadn't put that yellow on the map, this wouldn't have been an issue.
He's keeping his maps updated as our thoughts are changing.
And Joe, the public comment we got was pretty lackluster. I mean, it really, I mean.
When you talk about, the only public comment that I remember hearing was at this meeting, the last meeting that we had. It had nothing to do with Metro Council or how people might feel about other access to the airport at all.
No, it had to do with the
It was
zoning.
simply
Yeah.
2 developers and 2 landowners, as I
Mhm.
recall.
Yes.
And just, I don't know how to even ask this question, I guess, but just at that meeting, I listened to it, I was sick, so. I know they had talked about, and I guess this is just some of the questions I have that we don't have the answers to, and I know Ben's here, I don't know if he can answer any of these or not. We've drilled Brian and he doesn't really have any historical answers to these questions, but I'll call them developers, from Visser were here talking about that they had been in contact with the township previously about developing that land, and that it sounded, that's why they purchased it. Matter of fact, I think that was one of his comments, was it was purchased because we've been in contact with the township. We've had meetings, we've had emails, and I'm just wondering if you can give us any history on that with you being here, because I know Brian, it was before him, it sounds like. I don't think he was a part of any of those meetings or conversations. And I think as a subcommittee, it's another piece of the puzzle that we're missing, to know just what was discussed with the developers previously.
I thought, Ben, just for context, as I heard it, it was a meeting at the airport that perhaps Steve was at, and maybe you were, I don't know.
Yeah, so I was not at the meeting, but, really, they came to us and the airport had talked to us as well because they had property back there about, what it would take to extend utilities back there. And we came up with the back of the napkin estimate, the $13 million, and essentially told both parties that it didn't appear in the township's master plan. It wasn't a priority of the township. And in fact, we were investing all of our water, sewer, or water efforts into the PFAS area at that time, because that was 2018 and 2019. So that was really the last kind of conversation we had with them. They were never told by the township or anybody that we were going to extend water back there. In fact,
Because
I
am
think
I
they
wrong?
purchased it
But that's kind of
before
how,
they talked to us.
So you
I think that
definitely
they
made
talked
that
about
indication.
just the future zoning part, not necessarily water, if I recall.
Yes, they were referring to the future land use map, showing it as industrial for nearly 20
but
years.
he specifically mentioned that it sounded to me that there was specific conversations between the airport and the township and the developer. I don't know how long this has owned
It
that.
was subtly implied, is how I read that. I don't think it was.
He mentioned that also in his
Doesn't seem subtle.
comments at his first meeting.
Yes, at the first meeting. That's why I'm wondering, because he brought it up at our subcommittee meeting as well.
He did.
That he
in his
the
first
input-
comment period, and then I think he reflected on it again in his second
I think
comment
so too.
period.
I think so too, along with the survey, but he truly, and I can ask him, I mean, he won't be at our meeting this week, but he'll be there in 2 weeks. We have a schedule as well, in case anybody wants it. And just wondering what kind of conversations were had. You know, I don't know whether it will change our outlook on it, but I think that maybe it may identify some things within the township that maybe need to change for future things like this happening. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the conversation was about what it would take to get water sewer there. We provided them the estimates and said that the township wasn't investing in water sewer utilities in this area at that point. Again, that was, I know it was certainly pre-pandemic. And again, it was prior to the funding for the PFAS project, because we had told them that the township was focused on figuring out how to serve the PFAS affected areas with water at the time, and it wasn't something that we were focused on, so.
Anybody, I'm gonna move on.
Can I ask one
Please.
parting question? And this is just, I know this is kind of veered into the metro and back and forth in the subcommittee. But just so I understand what Metro Council is, they have no authority to enact any of these things. They're just a idea generation think
Economic
tank.
development.
So they
They're referred
could
to
draw
as
anything
a-
they want. but
They're an MPO, they're a metropolitan planning organization. They're authorized by enabling legislature, so there's certain things that they focus on. Interestingly enough, our Metro Council, out of all the MPOs that I've been involved in, probably do regional planning the least. So I was involved in pretty heavily in SEMCOG when I was in southeastern Michigan. They had a multi-person, regional planning department for these types of things. The Metro Council actually got rid of their planning department back in the mid 2000s. So they really focus on kind of these one-off studies. Again, I mentioned the study. I know that they worked with Hudsonville and Ottawa County on kind of the high-speed rail between those two. They come up with these one-off planning projects, but they actually, for an MPO, they're pretty light on the planning part of that. A big part of what they do is transportation funding. So state and federal transportation funding has to be planned for through a regional planning organization. So that's a lot of what Brian and I focus on these technical committee and policy committee meetings, is trying to figure out how that road funding is divvied up. And they do a 3-year tip every year, and programming their CMAQ funds and their all of that kind of stuff. But as far as non-transportation planning, they're really pretty light on it for MPO that encompasses the second biggest statistical metropolitan area of Michigan.
Anybody else have any other questions before? Awesome. Does anybody have, for Article 10, any old business? Yes.
I believe our meeting, the subcommittee meeting, is scheduled for this Wednesday morning at 7:30. Is that still on?
7:30 Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning, not Thursday morning.
Wednesday morning.
So you can attend.
And
Okay,
Brian.
and Brian.
I was talking to Scott about that, as I've got some childcare issues I'm trying to figure out, so I probably can't get in until 8 or shortly after. So if you guys want to start at 7:30, that's fine. You can continue. I'll join when I can, or if it works for people to start at 8. I can talk to you all afterwards.
Does
about that.
anybody have a problem with having that meeting from 8 to 9?
No.
Let's connect after the meeting and verify that.
Any other old business? Yes, member Rissy.
No, I was gonna go to any other. Sorry, I jumped the gun with the hand there.
All right, moving on to Article 11, any other business?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, we're going back to 10.
I'm sorry, I'll cover 11.
All right, moving on to Article 11, member Rissy was first, and then we'll go to member Moxley.
Not to harp on the GVMC too much, but I believe the Grand Valley Metro Council, one of their tasks is they handle Regis, correct? Yes. What does it take to get them to correct errors on their map? I know for years, the River Association has asked them to paint their map correctly, and they've got roads on their map that don't exist. Or they show, the airport vacated 44th Street in Berger years ago, but those right of ways still show on their map. I'm just curious if there's like a person that updates that stuff, or if those parcels just haven't changed? I'm just curious if,
Yep, so the Regis has staff, so we probably send those things to them individually. Right now, Brian's kind of our connection to
Our
Regis, so we're
liaison.
trying to transfer that to Eric, because he'll probably use it more, but if you send us a list of corrections that need to be made, we can try to get those done.
okay, thank you.
Does everybody know what Regis is here?
I use it all
Does
the
anybody?
time.
All right, so Scott is going to give us a tutorial. No, like,
Oh, great.
we go through planning
Then I
concepts.
do know.
Yeah. We go through, no, it's super, the parcel finder, like, there's some really good stuff there.
Yes.
So we'll do that as part of the planning like, we go through planning concepts every year anyway, so like that, it'll take 5 minutes at most, so.
It's a really good tool at the planning commission level. I use it almost every meeting to measure things and look
yeah,
at where
there's-
people
there's a
live
ton
and.
of Capabilities. that-
Oh,
Nothing
and-
Scott does takes 5 minutes.
Ben has his hand up.
All right, yes, Ben.
So just on top of that, for your guys' benefit, our membership to Regis also buys us a certain amount of map making hours each year. So if there is a particular map that the planning commission is interested in having made, we actually prepay for those hours. That's available. So just let Brian know we can get any maps made for you that you need.
Awesome. Member Moxley.
We probably should have put earplugs on him before you said
I was
that.
just-
Did you look up when you said that?
I was like, this might be one of his big jobs.
He
He's so
perked
good
right
at
up.
That's what I look for.
it. I know, you're so good at it.
Okay, I passed out invitations to Model Railroad Open House. Hopefully you can all join me. This is way beyond toy trains and model railroad setup stuff. Way beyond that. We've been working on it for 17 years. It focuses on Michigan's northern and climate and environment. Got 3,600 trees. A couple of you have already been to it before.
Awesome.
I invite you all to come. Please bring, if you have kids, bring the kids. If you have in-laws or parents who may be interested in something like this, please bring them. We live in Tamaron off of Laraway Lake, 1757 Hillsborough. If you have any questions on how to get there, give me a call. When you do come, please try to park on one side of the street so we don't jam up the street. When you walk up the driveway, come around to the back side of the house at the lower level, there's a sliding glass door. Just let yourself in, come on in, take off your coat, and you'll quickly see where the model railroad is located. And I'll be focused on my visitors. I've got a couple guys kind of hired to run the trains, but I can focus on you folks. And I have a historian coming in also who's going to talk about the railroad and the history in the state of Michigan. So,
Cool. Thank you.
there you go.
It's really, I brought my 9-year-old son and it really something else. I know Scott has done to it, so
Mhm.
yeah, it's huge.
My kids loved it.
Okay, I've got 3 things. We're gonna have 2 research requests coming your way, one from Scott, one from Ms. Member Engel on the Thornapple Point stuff. Once you get it, maybe send it to the planning commission. I don't want to have conversations in email, but
Mhm.
then just to save time tonight on stuff we're researching for Q1 of next year for subcommittee stuff. We had a lot of administrative stuff tonight. Brian and I talked last week, and a gift to you all is we will not have a meeting next week. Hopefully that's all right with everybody. We made a decision to just put it all in tonight and hopefully get through it. And that way everybody can enjoy their holiday week without a planning commission meeting. So yeah, you'll get the formal cancellation, tomorrow or
Tomorrow,
something.
yeah, we can do that.
But those are my 3 things. Does anybody else have anything for other business?
Is there any chance we can get our email, a way to change our email passwords?
That is a good point. We can't change them, Ben. I can get with you offline and walk you
Can't,
through.
you need to change your password?
Yeah,
You have to
we all
call
have the
them.
same password
Yeah.
and that we can't change them.
I did try calling it. Did not get.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we have the Cascade Township Christmas party at Grace's house.
Where did that come?
I don't think you're gonna get a second on that.
Chickens.
But Ben, I'll get with you offline on the password thing. I think it's something we could probably easily fix. It's
Yeah,
just a
shouldn't be a
setting.
problem. So I can have either Brian or Katie.
Or just, can you send me an email introducing me to Brian and I'll just take care of it for you?
Yep.
Sweet, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have any visitors out on Zoom? All right. Hearing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll support that.
Supported, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have a great night, everybody.
I'm like, Grace, you cracked me up
Good meeting.
for you, because